Quarry. I am Tara Douglas. I'm with the Marble Festival, and we are so excited to have this program this year with these three ladies who were all born at Gantt's Quarry. Gantt's Quarry is basically the company village for Alabama Marble Company. So they got your first post office in 1905. It was around for about 60 years. So in the late 60s, Alabama Marble Company shut down one of its plants, and so the town began dying out. But there's so much rich history of the local marble, the marble quarry here, and we're just really excited to get some information from these ladies about Gantt's Quarry. Now, I believe the population at its peak was about 542, so that was in the 40s. So it was a really nice, close-knit community, as you'll see with these ladies when they start telling their stories. So before we get going with the program, I'm going to let each one of them introduce themselves. So we'll start on the far end there with Miss Shirley Williams.
I was Shirley Faye Blankenship. I was born on the Fayetteville Road just across from Piggly Wiggly, and then later moved to Gantt's Quarry, Moretta Harrah. So my dad worked down in the hole getting up the marble. We'll discuss more later when they're showing pictures. So.
I'm Glenda Gaines. I was born in Sawakaga. I was Kittu. But I grew up in the Gantt's Quarry community. So I would love to share some things with you.
Okay, I'm the oldest. I'm original. I was born in the quarry on the back street in a one-bedroom shotgun shack. That's where the people who didn't have a lot of children, they would place them in a little small house, and you had to put your name on the list to get a house with more than one bedroom on the front street. But I'm original from 1933, way back.
Now with this program, we're going to have some pictures, and they're going to share some information and spark some memories with those pictures. I'm going to let them have some opening statements. I believe Ms. Glenda's got something to share with us before we get started with the pictures. But if you have any questions, please raise your hand and let me know so that I can bring the microphone to you, because we want to make sure everybody hears your question. So when we get to that point, I'll be running around putting the microphone in your face so you can let us know what your questions are. But Glenda, would you like to start?
Yes. Talking about Gantt's Quarry is always delightful. I decided I should write some things down because I could go on and on and on, and I would see you raise your hands and say, stop, that's enough. But as a child, I truly felt the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. The community that I grew up collectively ensured that we had a safe and healthy environment. The sense of community was noticeable, and each interaction contributed to our upbringing. We were, at Gantt's Quarry, surrounded by wisdom, love, and guidance from every corner. And it was in our upbringing, and it extended beyond the walls of our homes. I recall worshiping at St. Paul CME Church on the 2nd, 4th, and 5th Sundays. I was a member of New Hope Baptist Church, and we worshiped on the 1st and 3rd Sundays because our pastor, Reverend Gable Cook, preached in Gaston, Alabama on the 2nd and 4th Sunday. Now, how did we get to New Hope Baptist Church from Gantt's Quarry? Well, Mr. Rush Johnson worked for the Alabama Marble Company, and he picked up garbage, according to Miss Martha.
It was our garbage
It
man.
was a garbage truck, but we called it the trash truck where we lived. Anyway, during the week, he drove that truck, and he kept that truck at his home. And on Saturdays, I was informed by my uncle, Willie Frank Wilson, better known as Rabbit, that the Boy Scouts at Gantt's Quarry cleaned the truck. And that was Scout Troop 349. Mr. William Moon organized that group, and later Mr. Lurie Thomas served as the second Scoutmaster. I told you I had to take notes because I could go on and on. Mr. Rush would look on while the Scout boys and the Scoutmasters, they would be out there talking while the little guys did the work. Now, during the summer months, we thought it was very nice for them to assist us walking up a plank. Young people probably don't know what I'm referring to. but they would assist us to get up on the back of the truck. And we had no cover over it, so of course we had plenty of air uh, as children standing, but the adults were provided chairs. Now, during the winter months, and in case it rained, a canvas was placed over the top of the truck. Now, from there, Mr. Rush Johnson served as my superintendent of the Sunday school, and Mrs. Hannah Johnson served as my Sunday school teacher during my teen years. I also recall our two-room schoolhouse at Gantt Quarry. Mrs. Jessie Lee Miles was the principal, and she taught grades 1 through 3, and Mrs. Otis Helen Hughes taught grades 4 through 6. Now, in the yard of our school, we had a Liberty Bell, and in each classroom, we had that, what kind of heater? Tell them.
Pot belly.
A pot belly stove. And that's the way we stayed warm. Excuse me. I do not ever recall going into that little room being cold. My grandfather, men in the community, and later on Mrs. Laura Pearson made sure that that school was warm. Later on, Mrs. Laura Pearson ensured also that our school was clean every day before we went back to school. And she continued to do that even after her son, Bertie Pearson, was transferred to East Highland High School. Mr. Rush, you're going to hear his name again, also did what? He mowed the yard. We call it the yard. Today, we call it what? Our lawn. There was a baseball team known as Gantt Quarry Q. Now, although there were teams as early as the 1920s, this baseball team began around 1946 after World War II. Now, listen, I was not born at that particular time, but the information was shared. When the veterans returned and the quarry workers got together, they organized a baseball team. Years after I had grown up, I remember game day, because on game day, you could smell peanuts, you would see them frying fish, we ate barbecues, and it was a lively atmosphere. By both past and present major league standards, several players could have potentially made the professional level if they had had adequate exposure. Now, some of the guys that are still living today often talk about Grover Pig Meat Looney as an exceptional athlete. Baseball uniforms were supplied by the Georgia Marble Company. I see y'all shaking your head because you know about Grover. But the baseball uniforms were donated by Georgia Marble. I was also informed by my Uncle Rabbit that Thomas and Wyman and Moretta Quarry also pitched in and made sure that they had the baseball bats and balls and whatever they needed. The baseball diamond again was maintained by who? Mr. Rush Johnson, using the company's tractor. We had cheerleaders at that time, and I later became a cheerleader. We were children, of course. But Mr. Willie Samuel Knox had a car, and it was called the Packer, and he would drive us to away games. And his wife, Mrs. Willie Pearl Knox, would serve as our chaperone. But if you were adult from Sylacauga, the Gantt Quarry community, they also helped look out for us. We did not have a modern-day swimming pool like those available today. We went to swim in a swimming hole over on the Mitchell's property. We didn't have a lifeguard, but guess what? No one drowned and no one was bitten by a snake. God was good and still is. The next thing, Mr. Lowell Leonard. Mr. Lowell Leonard was a veteran and he worked in the finishing company at the quarry. And his wife, Mrs. Juanita Leonard, was a seamstress. Now, we always loved going to their house because they had a beautiful home. And Mr. Lowell always had juicy fruit, chewing gum for us to chew. And he would share and let us look at the coins he had collected when he was in the military. Mrs. Juanita would teach us about sewing and how to be a little young lady. And this is the way you set your table and things like that. Later, though, Listen to this carefully. Mr. Lowell and Mrs. Juanita thought we should have a little pool at the quarry, okay? Instead of going to the swimming hole. Well, it was a shallow pool. It was no way you could jump in it like we did at the Mitchell swimming hole. Because if you did, you would not be living today. We could walk in it and we could sit down in it, splash water on each other. That's about all you could do in that pool. And later the Johnsons had the same thing, Rush and Jesse Johnson. Same thing about that pool also. No diving because it was so shallow. But as I became adult, once I was out at the quarry and I visited Marion Johnson, and I looked at that little pool, I said, I cannot believe it was that small. And we laughed about it. But she had placed some goldfish in it. So that's what happened to that pool. Now, like the children nowadays, you're busy doing this number on your what? Your cell phone or whatever. Well, boys and girls played outside when I grew up. And some of the games we played were shooting marbles. We did climbing trees, riding in the homemade wagon. Some of you are too young to know what a homemade wagon is. We played hide and seek, hopscotch, and we made dolls. Now, let me tell you how the girls did the dolls. We had a Coca-Cola bottle, and we would get some twine and place the twine off inside the Coca-Cola bottle and let the other part hang out. Put the top back on the bottle, and we would braid their hair. It was braiding, that what you call now, but we call it plaiting. So when we would gather together, we would say, girl, we have to plait your hair. Now, at the 2005 Gantt Quarry reunion trivia game that was in June 30th at New Hope Baptist Church Life Center, we played a trivia game. And there were some questions that I could not remember, but the older group did inform us of what happened. Now, at the quarry, these young ladies know that a whistle would blow, okay? Now, the 6:45 a.m. whistle, you know what it was for?
Mm-hmm.
It informed the workers that they had 15 minutes to get to work before 7 a.m. It would ring again, blow again at 12. That would be noon to 12:30. That was their lunch break. And then at 4:10, that was the end of the workday. With
I never did know
Alabama
why they
Marble.
were at 10 minutes
Uh-huh.
stuck on it.
We don't know why they put it, but they put 10 minutes on it. That was the Alabama Marble Company at the end of the workday. Now, the bathhouse, I hope I'm not talking too fast, but the bathhouse was where we call Frog Hollow. Now, Frog Hollow was where the men went to shower, okay? Now, the children, including myself, you know what we did? We threw rocks at that little building where they were showering, and we would have the best time laughing because we would hear the men yelling, y'all stop that, stop that. Well, guess what we would do? We would laugh, throw more rocks, and then we would run. And the reason we would run is because if one of them had been dressed and had seen us, we were going to be in trouble. No way you could get around that. Now, the quarry also had a little club. It was a little shack. Of course, I couldn't go to the club because I was not old enough, but it was called the Juke, and they had a jukebox in it. Do y'all know what a jukebox was? I see him saying this number. Well, guess what? The adults could go there and they could dance. They could eat fried fish, chicken, peanuts, and drink sodas. But no alcoholic beverages were sold there. Do you know why? A deacon of the church ran the club. Another event at the quarry was hog killing. That was a significant day in our community because everyone got some meat. At the quarry, there were 3 stores, and my favorite store was the Ezekiel store, and you will see that on the slide. And I enjoyed that store because Ms. Ezekiel knew all of us by name. And we would get our little candy and sodas, and the adults would go there, and they would purchase essentials and gasoline. And the Ezekiel also allowed them to charge purchases because at that time, you had a little bill at the store. We had enjoyable times, but we also encountered some sad times. Sylvia Player, the daughter of Mr. Otis and Miss Johnny Mae Player, died from fire. The Milliner house burned. I think Sylvia may have been around 13 years of age. But one night, the Milliner's house burned, and their son Lorenzo was able to save some of his siblings, but the other ones died in the fire. Herbert Riggins Jr. was the son of Mr. Herbert and Mrs. Blanche Riggins, and some of the family members still live here today. But Herbert Jr. had gone to Alabama A&M College at that time, and he had come home for the summer to work to get money to go back to school. But while he was at Thomason and Wyman working, a stack of bags fell on him, and as a result, he was paralyzed. MacArthur Gaffney was described as smart and a very good athlete. But I would like to share about MacArthur is because MacArthur had attended East Highland. He had graduated from Alabama A&M College at that time. It was Scott. But anyway, come to find out, he had gotten a job in Missouri, and he was teaching school. But he volunteered to go into the armed service. And this is what happened to MacArthur. MacArthur went in the field because his buddy's birthday was that day. So instead of letting his buddy go in the field, he went for him. And as a result, that night, he was killed. So the community was saddened again by the loss of MacArthur, and you can read about him, but this happened in 1969, and some people still were there at the quarry. While teaching, like I said, he had volunteered. Both of his brothers, Willie Joe Gaffney and Early Gaffney, were his brothers, and they both died last year, but they also grew up at the quarry. MacArthur was the youngest son of Mr. Early and Mrs. Addie Gaffney. I'm sure most of you have seen the Gantt Quarry Post Office that's located down by Sylacauga High School and the Coleman Museum. I still recall my grandparents, Mr. Frank and Mrs. Callie Wilson, mailbox. It was P.O. Box 35. And in speaking with Steve Riggins, he informed me that their mailbox, Mr. Herbert and Miss Blanche, was P.O. Box 34. And they'll share with you in a moment about how we could get people's mail, right? If you went to the post office. I'm almost finished. My grandfather, Wilson, worked with Mr. Paul Wise, and he was the little short man you would see when you see the picture of the dinky. But I always admired my grandfather because I would see him walk atop of those little train cars while it was in motion. Another sad incident happened. The home of Mr. King David and Edna Lucille Wilson Crumpler, home burned. That was my home. Faced with the challenges of how we get to school, back to the quarry once we moved, Mrs. Jessie Lee Miles kindly came through and picked us up to get us to school every day. Sometimes we would go back home with her, but most of the time we went to my grandmother's house in the quarry, at the shack. Now, years later, my Uncle Rabbit persuaded my grandparents it was time to get out of the shack. And in 1960, a Jim Walters home was built, and it was considered Marble Highland, where they lived. Everything was still within the quarry, Gantt Quarry city limits, but that's what they call that particular area, Marble City Highlands. By the end of our community, I would like for you to know just how our little school and how people came out at Gantt Quarry. We ended up having a range of individuals, and we had jobs like we had the veterans, we had lawyers, we had teachers, we had supervisors, we had a college professor, we had a doctor, we had a pilot, we had secretaries, a reunion founder, contractors, we had pastors, an electrical engineer, and we had people to work at General Motors. But most of all, we had quarry workers. We were family, you all. And we still, the ones that are still living today, we still consider ourselves family. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Glenda before we look at some pictures? Okay, well, make sure you ask questions when we get the pictures up, and you'll see some of the things that Glenda was talking about once we have the slideshow going. What you're seeing with the train tracks going down through there with those homes.
Well,
We'll
yeah,
go back to the last one.
Back to the other one. As the cars go on, see that last road that crosses the track? When we moved up to the front street in a 2-bedroom house, you had to put your name on the list to get a larger house. And our house was about 2 doors down from that road that's way up on the top of the thing. And marble that they did not want. It was not quality. Wasn't good at it. Even no one would buy it. They would keep that train track ran all the way to what we call the Quarry Pond. I think if you look on your iPad, it's called the Marble City Lake. But they would dump excess marble, trash. They called it trash marble, on the side of the tracks. And just as far as a lot of it is still there, I guess. It's just junk marble. But that's the way the houses were. Everybody had a little, in all the houses, I don't know why, had 2 front doors. There was a door to go to the living room and a door to go to the bedroom. And it had a porch and two front doors. And they were all just alike. You didn't have to worry about keeping up with anybody because you looked just like everybody else did. And by the way, we had the little path out back. Everybody had an outdoor toilet. Didn't anybody get embarrassed to go to the toilet because everybody went. And we all had one. The first house here on this end is where the Keiths lived. And that's next house, you can see the white part of it, that's where Mr. and Ms. Dyson lived. And then where the train cuts to the left, it's going back toward the shop, the saws, the finishing plant, and the dinky was always parked back on that track that takes to the left, back in this little place every afternoon when they got through with it. But you're looking south from that picture. There's 2 men standing down there, who they are. That's an old picture. Mother had those. I don't know who gave them to Mother, but Mother had that one. Mm-hmm. And that derrick, I think, must have been at the first hole. There is a hole down there in front of the crusher that's full of water. And I was told that was the first quarry that they dug. And they abandoned it and went on and built the quarry that what we knew later on as the hole. But see, those derricks look like they're made out of tree pole, telephone type poles. Mm-hmm. And you can see the horse and buggy. So that had to be in the earlier times, because the derricks now that I grew up with at the quarry were iron, steel derricks that lifted the marble out of the quarries. But that was one of the earlier ways of doing it. And there's some more of that dumped marble. So they just dumped it and left it. Mm-hmm. Now you're looking north there, leaving town. You're leaving town here. And there's our beautiful post office. I never remember it being painted yellow. We had already moved and left before it was painted yellow. And this was our store at the quarry. We had the Kinzers ran this store. That was our country store. Mm-hmm. And behind the store is the rest of the shops and the powerhouse and the crusher and everything. That's our post office. You want me to tell you about the post office? Okay, that's the way I remember it white. Yeah. On the right side was the post office. And on the left side it's been several things. My daddy was born in 1908. And when he was 9 years old, he had his tonsils out in the left side of that little building. Said the doctor just put him up in a chair, it looked like a barber's chair, deadened his throat, took out his tonsils. Said he waited a little while to see if I wasn't going to bleed to death, I guess. And he and Papa got in a wagon, rode back down to the house. They lived on the Fayetteville Road. So, and all I know, it was old Dr. Wood's office. That's all I ever heard was old Dr. Wood's. So I guess when Dr. Woods died or left or something, it became a library. And they had a good library in the left-hand side, left side.
Right.
And my girlfriend's grandmother was a librarian, and we would go down and help her. We'd shelve books, check out books. We'd take the ashes out of the fireplace, and we'd sweep and dust and clean up. I spent many days in that left side. But on the right side, where the post office was, Mr. Garrett was the postmaster, and he had him a big rocking chair in there. And if you didn't have a P.O. box, you had to ask for your mail general delivery. And he'd be sitting back there in his rocker rocking, and somebody would come in, they'd stick the head in the little window there. Mr. Garrett, have I got any mail? No, you didn't get any today. He knew because he had to handle every piece of mail. And the mail that went out, he stamped every bit of it with a little bitty ink pad and a stamp, Gantt's Quarry, and the date on it. And our next door neighbor ordered some chickens from Sis Roebuck. And I was down there at the post office one day. You could hear those little chickens in there just chirping. And it was a real little
Yeah.
cardboard box of chickens.
That's why I
Ordered
got
it,
'em.
and they got them. And
Some.
they had a man from the office over there who every morning would come by the post office, pick up a big old canvas-looking pouch, U.S. mail. He would go over to the junction, and if you don't know where the junction is, it's past the Federal Road going toward Birmingham Highway. It was a little dock there with a little house on it where he had his little office. And so Mr. Garrett would get the mail ready. John would take it over to the junction. He'd drop off our mail, and he'd pick up a new pouch of mail. And we'd all gather at the post office about mail time twice a day. And that was the hub of the city, really. If you wanted to know anything or meet anybody or see what's going on, you go to the post office, you'd probably see somebody tell you what you wanted to know. And it was the gathering place. And when we started at Silicon High School, I still lived in a quarry, one of the houses. They had a bus that ran for us. We'd had to pay a nickel to ride to school. And we'd all meet at the post office and get on the bus to go to school. And that was the hub of the city. This is our church. I was a member of this church. That was Brother Henson and his wife. That marble sign there was made down in the shop, and they carved it. They engraved the letters, and they filled it in with that black filler like they do on tombstones and things. And they made that sign for our church. So that was them. And that's that when we sold our old church to the Thompson Weinman Marble Company, they cored the marble there in the ground, and they said that the purest, whitest marble that they cored was right in our churchyard. So they bought our church for $20,000, the old church for $20,000, and we moved up just inside the city limits and built the Marble City Baptist Church. And all the front of that church is marble, the columns, the front, and I forget what you call those little pieces down the side, but all that's Alabama marble. And it was free. That's the old church. We sold that to Thompson Weinman. They tore it down. And of course, Thompson Weinman is right over behind the church. They were drilling and digging right behind the church and right back behind our back door practically, so we sold it to them. And I'll tell you about this. All this land belonged to the Dobbins estate. And the deed read that they would give this land right here to the church as long as it remained a house of worship. So when we got ready to sell it, we had to deal with Miss Dobbins, and she said, well, if you'll give me $1, I'll sell it to you. You can do what you want to with it. So Mr. Lovern, who was principal of the school, gave Mrs. Dobbins $1 to pay for the church, so it would make it legal for us to sell that building to Thompson Weinman. So that was big business back then. Of course, that's the schoolhouse. I started school in the left-hand side. The rooms go down the left-hand side. It goes built like a horseshoe, you know. And my first grade room was right over the boiler room, and the old school had the pot-bellied stoves in it. And Mother had read in the paper where the boiler room at a school blew up somewhere up north and killed some children. And she was terrified that my first grade room was going to be right over the boiler room. But the lunchroom was down there with it also. But that was our school. It was brand new. I started first grade at a new school. We had radiators. And that was our pond, but one summer it dried up. And it never did it that I know of but one time. Most of the time it was full of water right up. The water was high enough to splash up against the runway. We didn't know to call that a pier. We called it a walkway. We didn't know any better. But it was a walkway, and that's where I spent many summers playing in that water when it was full. It's a huge pond. It goes way back up in the mountain. That's Glenda's favorite store. That's Ezekiel's store. That's the newest store. The other two stores were older. There's two stores across the street from them. Twin brothers each one opened a grocery store side by side. Claude and Clyde Dobson. But they both had successful businesses, but they were twins. And then Ms. Ezekiel and her husband, Buddy, built that one across the street, and it was a good store, too. She was attacked in that store one morning and almost killed.
There's our little dinky.
Somebody will rob them.
Yeah.
And there's our dinky with Mr. Wise, and you said that was your granddaddy.
Yes, Frank Wilson.
That's Glenda's granddaddy standing to the right. And he rode the front end of the dinky every time it came through the quarry. He was always standing on the front end of that. I think they called it the cow catcher. Is that what they call them on trains? That cleans the track of anything in the way. Mr. Wise and the man on the right, her granddaddy. That's our dinky. And I think you say it's in Montevallo at the train museum.
Calera.
Huh?
Calera, I think.
Calera, okay, Calera.
Yeah.
It's
That's what I've been
in the
told. I
museum.
haven't been over there.
But that little thing worked every day, all day long. Hauling that marble.
The railroad went right up through the village.
Mm-hmm. My house was right on the railroad track. Every day when it went by. And we used to take sand, and we heard a train coming. We'd put some sand on the track and let the train run over it. It'd flatten it out, and we'd break it up like it was chips.
How far did that train go?
All over the quarry, from the hold up to the crusher, down to the shop. It went everywhere, the little dinky. And of course, you see these derricks are down there to lift the marble out of the quarry as it's quarried.
And you see that machine down in the quarry. My daddy they called it a channel machine that would cut the marble in whatever dimension they wanted, and then they'd lift it up with a derrick and put it on a train car, take it to the finishing plant, saw it with water, or ship it whole or whatever. They sold it. And Robert E. Lee, I believe, is made out of that in Washington, out of Alabama marble.
And we played around the hole. Kids, they never told us to go on or get out of the way or this is dangerous, you run along. We just went where we wanted to. We watched them work. And they just let us watch and play all over the place.
I lived right on the bank, nearly as closest to the street here, to the hole on the back street. We'd venture in there on the weekend a little bit. And we had the dirt they took out of that hole was piled up behind where I lived, and we called it the dump.
The dump.
We used to play also.
We'd ride a bicycle. Well, if you had a bicycle back then, you didn't. But we played on it. Good days.
That's our vacation Bible school.
Yeah,
I brought that picture because, see the sign over the door? That's a big slab of marble. And they engraved it and fixed it for us.
and your mother's on that picture.
I
And-
think
and
everybody
I-
in the quarry is on that picture.
And my name is up there pointing with an arrow on the back row. You can just see part of my face because I didn't have a chair high enough to stand up on. And Miss Leila Hicks in that picture, she was a worker for that church.
Question, where is that marble sign now
When they tore the church down, they just trash. Just, we had enough marble. We didn't know nobody wanted. But it was just junked with all the windows and everything that went with it, just a pile.
Looks like it would have been put in the new one, didn't it?
Mhm. It should have been put in the new one, but it wasn't.
Okay, the house is going back to where the train tracks were, and the houses were so close. Wasn't that very loud?
They weren't as close as they really looked. We
Okay.
you could drive two cars between each house. There was more room than it really
Yeah.
looked.
And they didn't go fast anyway, did they?
No.
But we had 59 company houses.
Wow.
It was a big village.
Yeah, it looked big.
And
But I
we
would
had
just think the noise from the trains.
the four officials lived west of the quarry. Mr. King was president, and he had this huge, beautiful Spanish-looking house. I guess a hacienda with a clay tile roof.
Mhm.
They had a swimming pool. Now, back in the 30s and 40s, anybody that had a swimming pool, that was what you had in Hollywood.
Mhm.
But I played with Jerry, their daughter. I've been in their house. And the next house was Mr. Runge. He was vice president, and his was just a brick ranch type house. I went in his house too. And the next house around the curve belonged to Mr. Harrison. He was the secretary. It was a two-story, looked like a old English from up in the New England country, tall two-story wooden house. And his son was in the World War II Army, and he got killed overseas. And then you come on around again was the Gardner house, and it looked like a Frank Lloyd Wright cottage type, two-story and everything. And I played that's the girl, I played with their daughter. She was my age, and I played with her and been in that house many times. But they had their little circle of residents.
Did those houses have any old money?
Oh, those houses
Oh,
was
yeah, they
nice. They didn't know what a toilet was.
We did.
Yeah.
We knew.
We knew.
That's my take of, this is my architectural of it. But you can see the houses, they're just scattered all around. And if you keep going on that railroad track straight ahead, you go on till you go to the pond, as we called it. And way up in the far corner that was the school. The Methodist church was down below that. And our Baptist church and the stores were down here on this road coming into the town. And if you can see, the back line of the building on the back up at the top is the finishing plant. And in the middle was a railroad track that brought in the marble. And then below that was another long building called the saws. And those saws ran all the time. And I have to paint you a picture with my hand. If you could envision a bunch of garages, you drive your car in. Okay, they drive in and drop off a huge piece of marble, maybe big as this table. And they set the blades on the saws, whatever length, whatever width they wanted the marble to be. And they were still saws. And then this whole thing moved. The whole, looked like a big frame of a thing, moved all night long with those saws. And it dripped water all night long to keep it wet. And they would come in and throw shovels of sand on that marble for grit to get it to cut. And then when it got it all cut up, that's when they took it apart and put it wherever it needed to go, in slices. But that was, in that little dark building right in the middle I got post office on that. That's our little post office. And Mr. Wise lived next door.
And Miss Wise would know, she would know if we had been to town, caught the bus and gone to town, or if we had come home. So
She knew everything. 'Cause
she was
everybody
the
got on and off
information
the
lady
bus.
there.
So you can see down here at the bottom where I put those houses, the King
Now
and them
that's-
lived down there. They had fancy houses down in that circle at the bottom. And the baseball field she was talking about was in front of the King's house. See, I've got baseball park.
Yeah,
It was over there. Okay.
then
I don't remember that. I don't know
that's
what
it.
that picture
That's
is.
at the school auditorium, Gantt Quarry School Auditorium. That was a younger class than me, before me, but I went out there the first through the 8th grade. We had to come to either B.B. Comer or Sylacauga High School in the ninth grade. So my best friend, Peggy Benton, who worked here later years, she was going to Sylacauga, and her sister and another friend of ours. So that's where I went.
Now, I need to make one point. Where I grew up, our school did not look like that, okay? Just to let you know that.
But it didn't look that good when I was there either.
A lot of people knew Mr. Lovern, Pat Bivens' father. He was our teacher and principal my last year out there. That was our little baseball team. Some of those were my classmates at the school.
Okay, this is the Carter's house, Elijah and Florine Carter's house. And I gone down to the county building to just try to find some pictures to see how it looked after everyone had moved from there. So some of you may remember they had a son named Dwight Carter. That's Dwight's in the house. They attended also New Hope Baptist Church. That's the Looney's house. As you can see, it's overgrown. That's LZ and Maddie Looney's house. And the street where, well, I'll say the road where these houses were was known as Marble Highland. I don't ever remember them living in a shack, but her daughter informed me that after the storm, that's when Aunt Maddie and them built their home. That's Annie Whitehead's house. And she was my great aunt, and she had that house built there because she was from West Virginia. Her husband worked in the coal mine, so she wanted to move to be near her nieces. But anyway, later she left that house to my Aunt Maddie, and then she left it to Gerald, her daughter. It's overgrown. That's Johnny and Hannah Johnson's house. And Miss Moth, I think the other day you informed me that you had never seen
First time I'd ever seen hardwood
floors.
floors was in that house.
Uh-huh.
He was a bricklayer. He was
Plaster.
rich. He was
plaster.
rich
He was a
compared to
plaster.
us.
He was a plaster. Plaster.
Plaster, okay. But they had hardwood floors. Because my mother painted ours with old paint she'd buy white oak paint and try to make it look like hardwood floors.
And I'm sure if you knew Harriet Johnson Jackson, her parents' home at Gantt Quarry. That's the Johnson family, and you can see Harriet there in the picture, Rebecca Welch. You probably knew her at Sylacauga High School or knew of her, and that's Alvin Grayson, who married Lila. Never could find Lila, but we know that Miss Birdie is there. That's Harriet's grandmother. We used to call her Mom May. So you can see Jackson is there, and of course the kids on that picture too. That's Miss Bird right there to your left. And like I said, we called her Mom May. You know, when you're children, you grow up, you call everyone by what their grandkids called them. And that's Miss Versi and her daughter Elizabeth. Elizabeth is still living. She lives in Chicago. That was a little drawing that Verdia Pearson did when we had the Gantt Quarry reunion showing the Black area community.
Okay.
That was just information about the Gantt Quarry baseball team, which was from 1946 to 1965. And to let you know now, some of those people, and you can see some of the supporters, Jack and Knox, all of them are mainly gone, but Clara's still living, and let's see, Helen is living. Julia and Charles said she was going to come Monday, but most of them are gone now. That picture there, that's my family. To your left, that's Claudette Wilson Harrison that taught at Sylacauga High School. Next to her is my aunt, Calivia Wilson Williams, but no one would know her by Calivia, but you would say Sweet Pea, you would know Sweet Pea. Houston is next. He was the youngest of my mom's siblings. Next is my sister Ernestine Crumpler Garrett. She lives in New York. And on the end, you have heard me speak of Willie Frank Wilson. Well, that's Rabbit. Worked at the quarry here in Houston, both worked at the quarry. That was when we had the 2005 grand reunion, Gaines Quarry. A lot of people were deceased when we had that, but we had it at New Hope Baptist Church Life Center, and our theme was standing on the shoulders of our ancestors.
That is me in the floral-looking dress, and Billy Holmes in the middle, and Peggy Benton Green, who worked here at the library several years, has passed away when I started volunteering here. I worked at First National Bank 48 years, so we'd have the Gantt Quarry School reunion tried to for several years, but I'm the only one still living out of those. Well, no, on the bottom pictures, H.B. Friday and Janie, and I think and all the others are deceased. Yes. So we'd have our school reunion tried to about every year for a long time, but we haven't, and hardly anybody still living here or living at all now. So, but those were good days.
Any questions or? Well, thank you so much for doing that.
We'll
We
do it all
enjoyed it.
over again if we had to.
Precious
Yeah,
memories.
they have to put a time limit on us because we would keep you in here all day.
And there's time for questions, so if you have any, or if you want to talk to the ladies before you go, come on up and.
Oh, and one more thing, excuse me, I have to let the young people know, when we would go to the bathroom, one of the highlights going to the girls' bathroom, guess what? Lizards. Lizards. Yeah. Oh, lizards. Okay.
Well, thank all of you for coming this morning, and if you haven't visited the marble cell room across the way, hop in there and see what all the sculptors brought with them this year, and if you haven't gone down to the sculpting site, make sure to stop by and visit with our sculptors. We've got 36 out there, so we've got a lot going on down there. But thank you again, ladies. That was wonderful. And
We could be talking for
We
all
know.
day if we